Well, Toronto City Council will hear a new response plan this week in an effort to try and deal with a rat population that residents, I mean, you might have seen some of this already, they're showing it's out of control. Often, we're sometimes called Canada's rattiest city. Toronto received more than 1,300 service requests for rodents and rats. Ugh. In the first 6 months of this year alone. Joining us this morning is one of the people who asked for the creation of this rat response plan, Alejandra Bravo, councillor for Ward 9, Davenport in Toronto. Good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
You are in a rat-free zone, so you can relax. But your ward, I understand, is under a lot of construction, and that's what's supposed to be the reasoning behind all these rat populations being unearthed. You've called this a perfect storm. So what have you heard from your constituents about just how overrun they are with rats?
Well, it's even before I got elected, when I was in the community, knocking on doors, talking to people. People would show me videos. Look at what my backyard looks like right now, just seething with rats.
Yeah.
Or a woman told me that she, leaving her house in the morning, she had to bang on the screen door because they were sunning themselves. So she had to walk through, knowing that the rats outside on the street. And then since I got elected, I had a really heartbreaking story of a woman who lived in an area very close where there's been a lot of digging. And she said her daughter was awoken in the middle of the night when a rat jumped on her bed. And I just, I just inside, what does that do to a family and to that little girl? It's just, it was something that was really coming up as a problem that you hear from, directly affecting people's lives.
Yeah, well, and their peace of mind. If you worry a rat's going to be jumping on your bed, it's hard to go to sleep.
Yeah.
This response plan outlines several changes to how the city currently deals with rats. And here's a couple items for people. Reducing sources of food and water for rats, maintaining cleanliness in public areas, more response to high-issue neighborhoods, and new inspections for construction sites. How are these going to help, do you think?
Well, construction especially shouldn't be raining rats into communities. We know we need to build sewers, buildings, transit lines, but right now what's happening is when they dig, they disturb the mating grounds.
Yeah.
And that's just throwing them into the neighborhoods. The second thing is that climate change is making the mating season much longer, so a single pair of rats can reproduce hundreds of times in 1 year. So really it's about making sure that we manage it on site, that we trap the rats, and that also that there's a citywide coordination, because right now we don't have that.
So back to the construction sites, there's a lot of construction we know in the city of Toronto. It's almost as annoying as the rats. But are you asking then for the construction companies to either cull or trap the rats before they dig? What does that plan look like?
There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and it's not exactly, do A, B, and C, but it's for city-led projects, it would be a requirement to have a rat management plan, and it looks different depending on where you're digging. And for private companies and for Metrolinx, we're going to be requesting it and making notes onto their revision of their site plan when they're going to build, so that they're very clear. And I don't think any developer or Metrolinx wants to be throwing rats into a community. They want to be a good neighbor.
Yeah, and in fairness, they're not throwing them in. This is where the rats are choosing to go, where there's shelter, when there's food. There's other cities that have dealt with this rat problem before, and in particular, we think about New York City. They implemented a rat czar, which was fascinating. They had a series of changes that they're dealing with. Their rats are now down 18.4% compared to this time last year. So how are you planning to emulate that?
Well, what we're starting with isn't necessarily a rat czar. That's a big position. What we're talking about is a coordination lead, a rat enforcement table, so that we actually have a group of people that are in charge of dealing with what is transportation doing, what's public health doing, what is bylaw officers doing, so that they work together, call it a problem, and start to set metrics. It's really focusing on the neighborhoods that are most impacted at first, doing interventions, like making sure that there's good waste management, that there's the construction management plans, so that we can see results, because ultimately this is a threat to people's mental health. It's expensive to get rid of rats. They can ruin equipment. So it's really about also involving the public. When somebody's out there feeding a pigeon, they think they're feeding a pigeon, but guess what?
They're also feeding a rat. Well, they do call them the rats of the sky. I was curious if that implementation that you're talking about also includes culling the rats.
Yes, certainly they're considered a pest, unlike other wildlife. It's something that we have to do extermination as part of that. And there are different things that have been tried. Some cities, for example, are using rat birth control. That's not allowed in Canada. It's not something that the staff are looking at. But there are ways to do that. that are being examined, and involving people also makes makes sure that people aren't putting any of the of the food source out there.
Yeah. Really quickly, it's a $500,000 proposal. Is that, it sounds like a lot of money, but is it enough?
Well, we're going to see, I think, starting in a focused, strategic, pragmatic way, focusing on the places like in Leslieville where you have so many reports, or my ward where you have massive numbers of construction projects happening, and making sure that the interventions are tested and that maybe we need to grow, because this is a really important threat. I don't want to see a perfect rat storm anywhere, and I don't think anyone in the city wants that.
All right, Toronto City Councilor for Ward 9 Davenport, Alejandra Bravo, thanks for coming in. Put on your steel-toed boots because you're heading back to your ward. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.